When she said it, I thought I'd misheard her. We were sitting in my tiny kitchen, her eyes drilling into me like two lasers, sharp and unyielding. "You need to understand," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound desperate. "This is my only chance to change my life." I should have realized then that something was off, but I didn't. Instead, I sat there like a fool, trying to piece together what she meant, because surely this wasn't the same woman I'd been with for 3 years. Emma wasn't just my girlfriend. She was the whirlwind that had shaken up my carefully structured life. She was all fire and ambition, constantly chasing dreams that seemed just out of reach. That's what drew me to her in the first place. I loved her drive, her energy, the way she could light up a room just by walking into it. But now, as I sat across from her, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. Over the past year, her obsession with her appearance had grown from an occasional comment about her flaws to full-on research about cosmetic surgery. At first, I thought it was just one of her phases. Emma was always picking up new obsessions, yoga, baking, even knitting at one point, but they usually faded within weeks. This wasn't fading. She started showing me pictures of models and influencers, pointing out how she could look just like them with the right procedures. I tried to reassure her, telling her she was already beautiful, but it was like talking to a wall. Nothing I said mattered. And then, one day, she dropped the bombshell. She needed me to take out a loan to pay for it. "You have good credit," she said, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. "And it's not like you're using your savings for anything important right now." That hit me like a slap in the face. I'd been saving for years, for a house, for our future. But to her, it was just money sitting around. I told her no, of course. I told her I loved her the way she was and that we could work through her insecurities together. That's when her demeanor changed. She didn't cry or argue. She didn't even get angry. Instead, she got quiet, eerily quiet, and then, without another word, she grabbed her phone, blocked me on everything, and walked out the door. For a month, I didn't hear a single word from her. Not a text, not a call. Nothing. At first, I thought she just needed time to cool off. But as the days turned into weeks, it hit me. She wasn't coming back. And then, just when I'd started to move on, she showed up again. She was standing on my doorstep, looking like she hadn't slept in days, her makeup smeared and her hair a mess. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, just hear me out." But the thing is, she wasn't alone. There was a man standing behind her, his face half hidden by the shadows of the porch light. And that's when I realized Emma's mistake wasn't just leaving me. It was something much, much worse. I froze, staring at the man behind her. He wasn't looking at me. Instead, his eyes darted nervously around, like he didn't want to be seen here. Emma stepped closer, her hands clasped together like she was begging for forgiveness. But all I could focus on was him. Who was this guy? And why was he standing on my porch at midnight like he was part of her apology package? "Who's this?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Emma glanced back at him, her face pale. He's no one. Just someone who helped me out." "Helped her out?" My stomach tightened. "Helped you with what, Emma?" She hesitated, biting her lip, and for the first time in 3 years, I saw something in her I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. Not nervousness, not regret, fear. She opened her mouth to speak, but the guy interrupted her. "Look, man," he said, stepping forward, "I don't want any trouble." I told her I wasn't cool with coming here, but she insisted. Now I was even more confused. He wasn't just nervous, he was scared too. I crossed my arms, trying to steady my voice. "Why are you here? What do you want?" Emma grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "Please let me explain," she said, her voice shaking. "It's not what you think." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, it's not? Because right now it looks like you left me, blocked me, and now you're showing up at my house with some random guy in the middle of the night. So, why don't you tell me what it is, Emma?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "After I left, I thought I could handle things on my own. I thought I could find someone else to help me pay for everything. There it was, the truth, or at least part of it." "You mean you found someone else to take out a loan for you?" I said coldly. Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. "Not this time. I thought he could help," she whispered. "But it got complicated." "Complicated how?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. The guy finally spoke up again. "She owes me money," he blurted out, his voice tight. I blinked, trying to process what he'd just said. "Excuse me?" Emma turned to him, panic written all over her face. "I told you I'd pay you back. I just need more time." My heart sank as the pieces started falling into place. She hadn't just left me. She'd left to find someone else to fund her transformation. And when that didn't work out, she'd borrowed money from this guy. "How much does she owe you?" I asked, my voice flat. He hesitated, glancing at Emma before answering. 10 grand. 10 grand. I stared at Emma, my mind racing. She had always talked about wanting a better life, about changing herself to feel more confident, but I never thought she'd go this far. "You borrowed $10,000 from him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It was supposed to be an investment," she cried. "I thought if I just looked the part, I could start a new career, meet the right people, change everything." I laughed bitterly, running a hand through my hair. "And when that didn't work out, you decided to come back to me. What? You think I'm just going to fix this for you?" She reached out, her eyes pleading. "Please, I didn't know where else to go. I made a mistake, but I'll do anything to make it right. I need your help." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the way she'd walked out on me, like I was nothing more than a stepping stone she'd outgrown. And then, just as I was about to tell her to leave, the guy on my porch dropped another bombshell. "It's not just the money," he said, his voice low. "She also took something from me. Something important." I looked at Emma, my chest tightening. "What's he talking about?" Her face went pale, and for the first time, she couldn't meet my eyes. "Emma," I said, my voice low and dangerously calm. "What did you take from him?" She shook her head, stepping back, her hands trembling as she tried to form words. It's nothing, okay? He's exaggerating. It's not a big deal." The guy, however, wasn't having it. He stepped forward, his expression dark and full of anger now that he had the chance to speak. "Not a big deal? Are you serious? You took my safe, Emma. You stole from me." I blinked, stunned. "Wait, a safe? You stole his safe?" Emma's lips parted as if to deny it, but then she looked at the ground, unable to say a word. The guy jabbed a finger toward her. "I let her stay in my place for a while. She said she just needed some time to figure things out. I thought I was helping her out of a tough spot, and then one day she's gone. So is my safe. You want to know what's inside? Cash, sure, but also documents. Important documents. Stuff I can't replace." My heart started pounding as I turned to Emma. "Tell me he's lying." She didn't answer. Her silence was louder than any words could have been. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, stepping back, trying to process this insanity. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I'd loved and planned a future with, had apparently spiraled into a complete stranger. "Where is it, Emma?" the guy demanded, his voice rising. "I want it back, and I want it back now." Emma's voice cracked as she finally spoke. I don't have it anymore." Those words hit like a punch to the gut. The guy's jaw tightened, and I could see the veins bulging in his neck. "What do you mean you don't have it? Where is it?" "I sold it," she admitted, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't have a choice. I needed the money to cover my surgery deposit." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She'd stolen from this guy, taken something that clearly had more than just monetary value, and sold it off for a dream that had already fallen apart. "You're unbelievable," I said, my voice shaking. "You stole from him, burned through the money, and now you're standing here asking me for help?" "I didn't know what else to do," she shouted, her voice cracking. "I thought I could pay him back before he noticed, but then everything went wrong. The surgery didn't happen, the money's gone, and now I'm stuck." The guy stepped closer, and I instinctively moved between him and Emma. Not to protect her, but to keep this from turning into a physical confrontation. "I don't care about her excuses," he said through gritted teeth. "I want my documents back. She knows who she sold it to, and she's going to help me get it." I turned to Emma. "Is that true? Do you know who has the safe now?" Her lips quivered, and she nodded reluctantly. "Then you're going to fix this," I said firmly. "Right now." Emma's eyes darted between me and the guy, pure panic written all over her face. "You don't understand. The person I sold it to, he's not the kind of guy you just call up and ask for something back. He's dangerous. The air felt heavy as her words sank in. Dangerous? What has she gotten herself into? Who is he? The guy asked, his tone cold and unrelenting. Emma hesitated, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. His name is Victor. He runs a pawn shop downtown, but that's just a front. He's connected. Connected. Great. This just kept getting worse. The guy shook his head, letting out a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. You didn't just screw me over. You dragged me into some criminal mess. And now you're dragging him, he said, pointing at me. I felt my stomach churn. This wasn't my fight. Or at least, it shouldn't have been. But somehow, Emma had managed to pull me right into the middle of it. I'm not doing this, I said, stepping back. This is your problem, Emma. Not mine. But just as I turned to go back inside, she grabbed my arm, desperation etched into every feature of her face. Please don't walk away. I know I messed up, but I can't fix this alone. I need you. Her voice cracked on that last word, and for a moment, I saw the woman I used to love, the one I'd wanted to build a life with. But then I remembered everything she'd done, and my resolve hardened. You're going to fix this, I said, my voice ice cold. And if you drag me down with you, you'd better believe I'll make you regret it. The guy nodded, clearly done with the excuses. Let's go. We're going to find Victor, and you're going to get me my safe back. Tonight. Emma hesitated, looking at me like she wanted me to step in and save her. But I just crossed my arms and said, You wanted help? This is the only help you're getting. Without another word, we all piled into my car and headed toward what I was sure was going to be one of the worst nights of my life. The drive to Victor's pawn shop was suffocating. Emma sat in the back seat, chewing her lip nervously, while the guy, whose name I learned was Luke, sat beside me, staring out the window in simmering silence. I could feel the tension radiating off both of them, and the closer we got, the more my stomach churned. The pawn shop was on the bad side of town, tucked between a boarded-up liquor store and an auto repair shop that looked like it hadn't seen business in decades. The neon open sign flickered weakly, casting an eerie glow on the cracked pavement outside. Are you sure about this? I asked, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. Emma didn't answer right away. Finally, she mumbled, He's usually here this time of night. Just let me do the talking. Luke let out a dry laugh. You think I'm trusting you to handle this? Not a chance. You've already proven you're terrible at making decisions. I parked the car, my heart pounding as we all stepped out. The air was thick with the smell of oil and something faintly metallic. As we approached the shop, Emma hesitated, her hand lingering on the door handle. You don't have to come in, she said, looking at me. I scoffed. Oh, I'm definitely coming in. I'm not leaving you alone to make this worse. The bell above the door jingled as we stepped inside, and I immediately felt the weight of Victor's presence. He was standing behind the counter, a broad-shouldered man with a shaved head and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and they landed on Emma the moment we entered. Well, he said, his deep voice filling the room. If it isn't my favorite customer. Emma flinched, and I could see the fear in her eyes as she forced a nervous smile. Hi, Victor. I need to talk to you about the safe I sold you. Victor's expression didn't change, but his eyes flicked to Luke and then to me, sizing us up. The safe, huh? You mean the one you practically begged me to take off your hands? Luke stepped forward, his fists clenched at his sides. She stole it from me, and I want it back. Victor raised an eyebrow, leaning casually on the counter. Stole it, huh? That's an interesting way to frame it. But I don't care where it came from. You know the deal. Once something's mine, it's mine. I don't do refunds. Emma's voice cracked as she spoke. Please, Victor. You don't understand. The documents inside the safe, they're important. She glanced nervously at Luke. He'll kill me if I don't get them back. Victor's lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. Is that so? Sounds like a personal problem to me. I stepped forward, my anger finally bubbling to the surface. Look, we're not here to argue. Just tell us how much it'll take to get the safe back. Victor's eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, the room felt unbearably still. Then he laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that sent chills down my spine. You think this is about money? Cute. Luke's patience snapped. Enough games. Where is it? Victor's smile disappeared, and the room suddenly felt colder. Watch your tone, kid, he said, his voice dangerously low. You don't walk into my shop and make demands. Emma stepped between them, her hands raised. Please, Victor. I'll do anything. Just give it back. Victor leaned back, studying her for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he nodded. Fine. You want the safe? You can have it. Emma's face lit up with relief, but it was short-lived. But Victor continued, It's not here. My stomach dropped. What do you mean it's not here? Victor smirked, clearly enjoying our discomfort. I don't keep stuff like that on site. Too risky. It's in storage. If you want it back, you're coming with me to get it. Luke and I exchanged a look, both of us sensing this wasn't going to end well. Why can't you just bring it here? I asked. Victor's smile widened. Because I don't trust you. For all I know, you're planning to rob me blind. So we're doing this my way, or not at all. Emma looked at me, her eyes pleading. Please, we don't have a choice. Against my better judgment, I nodded. Fine, let's get this over with. Victor grabbed a set of keys from behind the counter and motioned for us to follow him. As we stepped back out into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking straight into a trap. We got into our cars, Victor in his own, us trailing behind, and drove for what felt like an eternity. The city lights faded, replaced by the dim glow of street lamps as we entered a more industrial area. Finally, Victor pulled into a fenced lot surrounded by warehouses, the shadows stretching long and ominous under the moonlight. He parked in front of a large, rusted building and got out, motioning for us to follow. Wait here, he said, disappearing inside. Minutes passed, each one heavier than the last. I could feel the tension radiating from Luke, and Emma was practically trembling beside me. What if he doesn't come back? She whispered. But before I could answer, Victor reappeared, carrying a large, dented safe in his arms. He set it down in front of us, brushing his hands off. There you go, he said, just like I promised. But as Luke stepped forward to inspect it, Victor pulled out something from his pocket, a small, black pistol. One more thing, he said, his voice calm and steady. Before you go, we need to have a little chat. The glint of the pistol caught in the moonlight froze us all in place. My heart slammed against my ribs as Victor casually held it at his side, his posture relaxed, but his intentions unmistakable. Luke raised his hand slowly, his eyes locked on Victor. Whoa. Hey, we're not here to cause trouble. We just want the safe, and we'll leave. Victor's smirk returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. Oh, I know you're not here for trouble. The thing is, trouble has a way of finding people who think they can outsmart me. So, before I let you leave with this safe, we need to clear a few things up. Emma let out a shaky breath. Victor, please. I already told you. I didn't mean to. Quiet, Victor snapped, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. He turned his attention back to Luke and me. Do you even know what's in this safe? Luke's jaw tightened. I know what's mine. That's all that matters. Victor chuckled, a low, humorless sound. See, that's the thing. I don't think you do. Because if you really knew, you'd have never let her walk out with it in the first place. I glanced at Emma, who was now trembling, her face pale. What's he talking about? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head quickly, her eyes darting everywhere but toward me. It's nothing, okay? Just documents and cash. That's all. Victor tilted his head, clearly enjoying her unraveling. Documents and cash, huh? Sure, there's some of that in there. But there's also something else. Something worth a hell of a lot more than 10 grand. Luke took a step closer, his fists clenched. What are you saying? Victor's smile vanished. I'm saying your girl here sold me more than just a safe. She sold me leverage, power. And now, you're putting me in a position where I have to give it up. Emma let out a choked sob. I didn't know what was in it. I swear. Victor snorted. Don't lie to me. You knew exactly what you were doing when you came to me. You thought you could unload this mess on someone else and walk away clean. But now, here you are, dragging these poor fools into it. I felt like I was drowning in confusion. What's in the safe, Emma? She finally looked at me, her eyes wide and desperate. I, I don't know everything, but it's files. Names, accounts, transactions, stuff that shouldn't be out in the open. I swear I thought it was just some shady business records, but Victor's exaggerating. Victor barked a laugh. Exaggerating? Let me spell it out for you, genius. What she sold me was blackmail material. Enough to ruin lives, burn businesses to the ground, and maybe even get someone killed. Luke's face darkened, and I could see the fury simmering just beneath the surface. You're saying my safe was full of illegal crap? Victor raised an eyebrow. I'm saying your safe was a ticking time bomb. And now, thanks to her, it's sitting in my lap. I stared at Emma, my chest tight with betrayal and disbelief. You knew, I said, my voice shaking. You knew this wasn't just about money, and you didn't say anything. I didn't think it mattered, she cried. I thought Victor would keep it, or destroy it, or I don't know. I didn't think he'd bring it back to you. Victor sighed, clearly running out of patience. Here's how this is going to work. You take the safe, you disappear, and I never see any of you again. But if I hear so much as a whisper about this coming back to me, I'll make sure none of you have the chance to regret it. His words hung heavy in the air, the threat unmistakable. Luke stepped forward, his hands trembling with rage as he reached for the safe. We'll take it, and we're done here. Victor didn't move, but his grip on the pistol tightened ever so slightly. Smart choice. As Luke hauled the safe toward the car, Victor's eyes locked on me. You seem like the only one here with a brain. Do yourself a favor. Walk away from her. She's nothing but trouble, and she'll drag you down with her. I didn't respond. I couldn't. We piled into the car, the safe barely fitting in the trunk, and sped off without another word. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I drove, the weight of Victor's warning pressing down on me like a boulder. And yet, as the silence stretched on, I couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror at Emma. She was crying silently, her face buried in her hands. She'd lied to me. She'd used me. But somehow, I still felt like the worst was yet to come. The drive back to my place was agonizingly silent. Emma sat in the back seat, a mess of tears and muffled sobs, while Luke stared out the window, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might snap. The safe in the trunk felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, not just physically, but with the weight of whatever secrets were locked inside. When we finally pulled into my driveway, nobody moved at first. The tension in the car was suffocating, a storm waiting to erupt. Luke was the first to break the silence. Pop the trunk, he said, his voice cold and flat. I hesitated. Something about the way Victor had spoken back at the warehouse still echoed in my mind. Whatever was inside that safe wasn't just dangerous, it was lethal. But I reached for the trunk release anyway, and Luke got out, yanking the safe onto the driveway with a grunt. We're opening it, he said firmly. Emma practically bolted out of the car, shaking her head. No, you can't. You don't understand what's in there. Luke turned to her, his eyes blazing with fury. You're damn right I don't understand, because you lied to all of us. So now we're going to find out exactly what kind of mess you've dragged us into. I stepped out, my stomach churning. Luke, maybe we should. No. He cut me off, glaring at me now. We're opening it. I don't care what Victor said, and I don't care what she's trying to hide. I deserve to know what I'm risking my life for. Emma looked like she might collapse. Please just leave it alone, she begged. It's better if you don't know. But Luke was already pulling a crowbar from his car. He wedged it into the edge of the safe and started prying it open with the kind of force only pure anger could fuel. The metal groaned and creaked under the strain, and after a few agonizing moments, the lock gave way. The lid flew open, and for a second, none of us moved. The inside was packed with stacks of cash, bundled neatly with rubber bands, but that wasn't what drew our attention. Beneath the money was a thick folder, the kind you'd see in an old detective movie, with tabs sticking out and pages spilling over the edges. Luke grabbed the folder, his hands trembling. He flipped it open, and as his eyes scanned the contents, his face went pale. "What is this?" he muttered, his voice barely audible. I moved closer, my curiosity overriding my better judgment. The pages were filled with photos, documents, and spreadsheets. The photos were of men, businessmen, by the look of them, caught in compromising situations, a politician with a woman who definitely wasn't his wife, a CEO handing over what looked like a suitcase full of cash, and others that made my stomach churn. The documents detailed offshore accounts, bribes, and blackmail payments. It was a playbook for destroying lives. This is blackmail material, I said, my voice hollow. Luke flipped to another page, his breathing quickening. This guy. I know this guy. He jabbed a finger at one of the photos. He's the CFO of my company. He's been embezzling money for years. If this gets out, Jesus Christ. Emma let out a choked sob. I didn't know, she cried. I didn't know it was this bad. I just thought it was business stuff. Nothing like this. Luke turned on her, his face red with fury. You didn't think? You didn't think? You stole this and sold it to a criminal. And now you're telling me you didn't bother to find out what the hell you were handing over. Emma collapsed onto the driveway, her hands covering her face. I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't look at her. My head was spinning, my mind racing with possibilities. If Victor had held on to this, he could have ruined lives, toppled companies. But now it was in our hands, and that made us targets. What do we do with it? I asked, my voice shaking. Luke stared at the folder, his jaw working as he processed the magnitude of what we were holding. We burn it, he said finally. Emma gasped. No, you can't. What about the money? We can use it to pay him back. Luke rounded on her again. Are you insane? This isn't just about the money. People could kill for this. Hell, they probably already have. We can't keep it. I nodded reluctantly. He's right. If we keep this, we're putting a target on our backs. We need to destroy it. Emma looked between us, her face crumpling as she realized she was outnumbered. I just wanted a chance to start over, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I felt a pang of sympathy, but it wasn't enough to outweigh the anger and betrayal boiling inside me. And now you've dragged us into something we might not survive, I said coldly. Luke grabbed a gas can from his trunk and doused the folder in the cash, ignoring Emma's protests. He struck a match, and within seconds, the flames roared to life, consuming everything. The heat was intense, the smell acrid, and as I watched the papers curl and blacken, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. The safe was empty now, its secrets reduced to ash. But I knew this wasn't over. People like Victor didn't just let things go, and neither did the men whose names were on those documents. We had destroyed the evidence, but the storm was still coming. I could feel it. And Emma? She wasn't the eye of the hurricane anymore. She was the wreckage it left behind. The flames had barely died down before the weight of what we'd done started sinking in. Luke stared at the smoldering pile of ash on my driveway, his hands resting on his knees as he tried to catch his breath. Emma sat on the ground a few feet away, hugging her knees to her chest, her face streaked with tears. I stood there, numb, staring at the empty safe like it was a coffin. The blackmail, the money, it was all gone. And yet, the unease in my chest hadn't lifted. If anything, it felt heavier. Luke broke the silence first. You know this doesn't end here, right? I looked at him, my throat dry. What do you mean? He straightened up, his expression grim. Victor's not going to take this lightly. He wanted that safe for a reason. We just burned his leverage, and when he finds out, he's going to come after us. Emma let out a strangled sob. I'll talk to him, she said, her voice trembling. I'll explain. I'll tell him it was my fault, and... Luke cut her off with a bitter laugh. You think that's going to help? You think he'll just pat you on the back and say, no problem? The only reason we're not already in trouble is because he doesn't know what we just did. I ran a hand through my hair, my mind racing. So what do we do? Do we leave? Go to the cops? Luke shook his head. Going to the cops isn't an option. If we tell them about Victor, they'll want to know what was in the safe. And if word gets out about what we burned, every single person on those documents will be looking for us. Emma looked up at him, her face pale. So what? We just wait? Hope he doesn't come after us? Luke didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence spoke volumes. I felt a surge of anger bubbling up. This is insane. We didn't ask for this. We're not criminals. We didn't even keep the damn money. Luke turned to me, his eyes hard. Doesn't matter. As far as Victor's concerned, with a reason he lost everything. And as far as the people on those documents are concerned, we're liabilities. We need to figure out how to stay ahead of this before it's too late. Emma wiped her face with trembling hands. I'll talk to Victor, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't bother, Luke snapped. The only thing you're going to do is make it worse. The weight of his words hung in the air, and for a moment, nobody spoke. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, my stomach flipping when I saw the message on the screen. Unknown number. I know what you did. We need to talk. Now. I stared at the text, my hands trembling. It's starting, I said, my voice barely audible. Luke snatched the phone from my hand, his jaw tightening as he read the message. Victor, he muttered. He knows. Emma's face drained of all color. What does he want? Luke handed the phone back to me, his expression grim. There's only one way to find out. My hands felt like they weren't even mine as I typed out a reply. Where? The response came almost immediately. The warehouse. 1 hour. Don't make me wait. I showed the message to Luke, who let out a long, frustrated sigh. He's not going to let this go. Emma grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Don't go, she pleaded. He's dangerous. You don't know what he's capable of. I pulled away from her, anger and exhaustion bubbling to the surface. You put me in this situation, Emma. You dragged me into your mess, and now I don't have a choice. Luke grabbed my shoulder, pulling me aside. You can't go alone, he said. I nodded, feeling the pit in my stomach grow deeper. Then let's go together. Emma's voice broke behind me. Please don't do this. But there was no other option. If we didn't face Victor now, he'd just keep coming. The longer we waited, the worse it would get. We climbed into the car again, the drive to the warehouse feeling even heavier this time. The city seemed darker, quieter, as if it knew something terrible was about to happen. When we pulled up to the warehouse, Victor was already waiting, leaning against the same rusted building as before. His expression was unreadable, but the tension in his stance was impossible to miss. You're late, he said, his voice calm but laced with menace. Luke and I stepped out of the car, keeping a careful distance. We're here, Luke said flatly. What do you want? Victor's eyes flicked to me, then to Luke, and finally back to the car, where Emma sat frozen in the back seat. You brought her, he said, a slow smile creeping onto his face. Good. This'll save me some time. My heart sank. What do you mean? Victor pushed off the wall, his hands casually slipping into his pockets. You burned the safe, he said. I know that, and now you owe me. But lucky for you, I'm not unreasonable. I don't want money. Luke's fist clenched. Then what the hell do you want? Victor's smile widened, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of malice and amusement. I want her, he said, nodding toward Emma. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. You're insane, I said, my voice shaking. Victor shrugged. Call it insurance. She caused this mess, and now she's going to make it right. You don't have to worry. I'm not going to hurt her. I just need her to work off what she owes me. Emma's terrified scream pierced the night as she realized what he was saying. No, you can't do this. Luke stepped forward, his voice a low growl. Over my dead body. Victor's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, hard glare. That could be arranged. And just like that, the nightmare we thought we'd escaped came crashing back down around us. Victor's words sent a chill through me that I couldn't shake. Emma's scream still echoed in the night air as she scrambled out of the car, her hands shaking as she clung to the door. I stepped in front of her instinctively, my pulse racing. You're not taking her, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Victor tilted his head, his gaze sharp enough to cut through steel. Oh, I think I am. See, this isn't a negotiation. You burned something that didn't belong to you. Now, someone has to pay the price. Luke stepped forward, fists clenched. Why don't you take it out on me? She's not the one you want. Victor let out a dry laugh, the sound devoid of humor. That's where you're wrong. She's exactly who I want. She's the one who started this mess. The rest of you? You're just collateral damage. Emma collapsed to her knees, her face pale and streaked with tears. I'll do anything, she choked out. Just don't hurt them. I'll work for you. I'll pay you back, whatever it takes. I grabbed her arm, pulling her to her feet. You're not going anywhere with him, I said firmly. Victor's patience was clearly running out. He pulled out his pistol again, the metallic glint under the moonlight, sending a fresh wave of panic through me. I'm losing my patience, he said, his tone icy. Either she comes with me willingly, or I make her. Your choice. Luke took another step forward, his voice low and dangerous. You pull that trigger, and I swear you won't walk out of here alive. Victor's expression didn't waver. Bold talk for someone so out of his depth. I looked between them, the tension about to snap like a frayed wire. My heart pounded as I searched for a way out, anything to de-escalate the situation. Wait, I said suddenly, raising my hands. There's got to be another way. You don't need her. You said this was about making things right? What if we can still fix this? Victor's eyes narrowed. You burned the leverage. How exactly do you plan to fix anything? I swallowed hard, my mind racing. There's got to be copies of those documents, right? People like the ones in that folder wouldn't just leave all their dirty secrets in one place. If we can find something else, something just as valuable, would that settle things? Victor raised an eyebrow, considering my words. For the first time, he looked uncertain, like I'd caught him off guard. You're suggesting what? That you'll bring me something else to replace what I lost. Exactly, I said, clinging to the shred of hope in his hesitation. Give us time, and we'll find something even better. Just let us walk out of here tonight. Victor stared at me for what felt like an eternity, the weight of his gaze pressing down on me like a physical force. Finally, he lowered the pistol, though he kept it in his hand. You've got 48 hours, he said. Bring me something worth my time, or I'll come find you. And next time, there won't be any talking. Emma let out a strangled sob, but I didn't look at her. I couldn't. My focus was entirely on Victor, on the threat he represented and the ticking clock now hanging over us. Deal, I said, my voice steady despite the panic clawing at my chest. Victor smirked, stepping back toward his car. I hope you know what you're doing. For your sake. We didn't move until his car disappeared into the night. The moment he was gone, the adrenaline that had been keeping me upright drained out of me, and I staggered back, leaning against the car to catch my breath. What the hell are you thinking? Luke snapped, rounding on me. You just made a deal with the devil. What choice did I have? I shot back. You think he would have let us walk away without something to hold over us? At least now we have a chance. Emma finally found her voice, though it was weak and trembling. What are we going to do? I turned to her, my anger bubbling to the surface. You're going to help us fix this. You got us into this mess, and now you're going to get us out. Luke let out a bitter laugh. And how exactly do you plan to find something Victor wants in 48 hours? It's not like we have a Rolodex of shady secrets lying around. I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But as I looked at Emma, I realized something. She'd already proven she had a knack for finding the kind of trouble that people like Victor thrived on. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to turn that into a solution. You said you didn't know everything that was in the safe, I said to her. But you must know something, some connection, some loose thread we can pull on. Think. She wiped her face with trembling hands, her eyes darting around like a cornered animal. There's someone I used to know. He's in that world. If anyone has dirt worth trading, it's him. Luke crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. And why would this guy help us? Emma hesitated, her voice barely audible when she spoke. Because he owes me. I didn't like the sound of that, and neither did Luke. But at this point, we didn't have a choice. Then let's go, I said. We've got 48 hours to make this right, or we're all dead. Emma nodded reluctantly, and we piled back into the car. As we drove off into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was still ahead of us. Whatever Emma had planned, it wasn't going to come without a cost, and I wasn't sure any of us could afford to pay it. The address Emma gave us led to a part of the city I'd only ever seen in crime reports, a cluster of dilapidated buildings and flickering streetlights that seemed to buzz louder than the occasional passing car. The place looked like it had been forgotten by time, except for the faint hum of activity coming from the shadows. We parked a block away, not wanting to draw unnecessary attention. Emma sat in the back seat, her hands clenched in her lap. She hadn't said a word since we left my driveway, and the silence was starting to feel heavier than the situation itself. Luke finally broke it. "Who is this guy, Emma?" She hesitated, her gaze fixed out the window. "His name's Marcus. We were close a long time ago. He runs a few underground operations now. If there's something Victor would value, Marcus will know about it." Luke let out a bitter laugh. "Of course. Another shady connection. You really know how to pick him." Emma flinched but didn't argue. I could see the guilt weighing on her, but I didn't have the energy to comfort her. Not after everything she'd put us through. We got out of the car and followed Emma to an unmarked door in the middle of a graffiti-covered wall. She knocked 3 times, her movements mechanical, like she'd done this before. After a long moment, the door creaked open, and a tall, muscular man with a shaved head and a tattoo creeping up his neck stared down at us. "Emma," he said, his voice a mix of surprise and suspicion. "Didn't think I'd see you again." She forced a weak smile. "I need to talk to Marcus. It's important." The man's eyes flicked to Luke and me, then back to her. "He's busy." Emma stepped closer, her voice trembling but determined. "Tell him it's me. He'll want to hear what I have to say." The man studied her for a moment, then sighed and stepped aside. "Wait here." As he disappeared inside, I turned to Emma. "How do you know this guy is going to help us?" She didn't answer right away. When she finally did, her voice was barely a whisper. "Because he owes me more than I owe him." Before I could press her, the door opened again, and the man motioned for us to follow. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of smoke and something metallic, and the dim lighting cast long, distorted shadows on the walls. We were led to a back room where Marcus sat at a desk, counting a stack of cash. He looked up when we entered, his sharp eyes narrowing at Emma. "Well, if it isn't my favorite little troublemaker." Emma stiffened, but she didn't back down. "I need your help, Marcus. It's life or death." Marcus leaned back in his chair, smirking. "With you, it always is. What's the problem this time?" She hesitated, glancing at Luke and me before answering. "I need leverage. Something big. Enough to settle a debt with Victor." At the mention of Victor's name, Marcus's smirk disappeared. "You're messing with Victor? That's bold. Even for you." "I didn't have a choice," Emma said quickly. "Please, Marcus. You're the only one who can help me." Marcus studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "I might have something, but it's going to cost you." Luke bristled. "Cost her? She doesn't have anything to give." Marcus ignored him, his gaze locked on Emma. "Oh, she does? She knows exactly what I want." Emma's face turned pale, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. "You can't be serious," she whispered. Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Dead serious. You give me what I want, and I'll give you what you need to keep Victor off your back. Take it or leave it." I stepped forward, my frustration boiling over. "What the hell are you talking about? What does she have that's so valuable to you?" Marcus didn't even look at me. His focus remained entirely on Emma. "It's between me and her. But if she says no, your little Victor problem becomes your permanent problem." Emma's hands trembled as she stared at Marcus. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "Emma," I said, my chest tightening, "what are you agreeing to?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and resignation. "It doesn't matter. If this gets us out of this mess, then it's worth it." Marcus grinned, clearly satisfied. "Smart girl. Now let's talk details." For the next 20 minutes, we stood in tense silence as Marcus laid out his terms to Emma. She nodded along, her face pale but determined. When they finished, she turned to me and Luke. "It's done," she said. "We'll have what Victor wants by tomorrow night." As we left the building, Luke pulled her aside. "What the hell did you just agree to?" Emma shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "Don't ask. Just know that it's enough to keep us alive." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that whatever she'd just sacrificed would be enough to fix this nightmare. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. And whatever Emma had promised, it was going to come at a price none of us were ready to pay.